What was going on? His beloved little sister had disappeared. Yet his parents had not gone looking for her. Zack understood now that she had probably been sold off. Slavery was now outlawed through the efforts of the Golden Princess, but at that time it had been quite widespread throughout the kingdom. Therefore, whenever Zack went whoring and passed a hooker, he could not help but look at the girl's face. Of course, he did not think he would actually be able to find his little sister, and even if he did find her, he did not know what he would say to her. Even so, he could not help but keep looking. And amidst this miserable life of poverty, he had been conscripted. The kingdom periodically mobilized its armies against the empire, and when it did so, the kingdom would round up all the able-bodied men in the villages and send them to the battlefield. The absence of their strong young men for a month had dire consequences for the villages. However, some people were grateful for this conscription. After all, the less mouths to feed, the less food the families would need. In addition, the young conscripts would be fed by the kingdom. For some, it might be the first time they had ever eaten their fill. Still, that was all the merit that situation held. No matter how hard a man fought, he would not be rewarded unless he had made outstanding accomplishments. No, sometimes these men would not be rewarded no matter what they did. Only the lucky would be rewarded. Then, when they returned to their villages, they still had to face the despondent reality that the harvest was poor, because there had been too few hands to take it in. Zack had been conscripted twice, but his third tour of duty had seen his fortunes change. That war had been the same as all the others, ending after a few minor skirmishes. Zack, who had held on to his life, was about to head home when he stopped. He looked at the weapon in his hand, and it was as though he had received a sign from the heavens. Instead of returning to his village, would it not be better to choose a different way of life? Still, Zack was a mere farmer with just a bit of basic training. He had little choice in what sort of new life he could lead. He did not possess exceptional physical abilities, nor did he possess a talent, a special ability, that was only possessed by a few special people. His learning was largely related to farming, when to sow which seeds and so on. What Zack decided to do pertained to the sole trump card he possessed, in other words, running away with the weapon that the kingdom had temporarily issued him. He had not considered the difficulties it would cause for his parents, because they had sold off his little sister, even if it was to keep the rest of the family alive, and thus he did not love his parents. But how could someone who did not know the land, or have any backers desert so easily? In the end, he managed to find people to help him, which was fortunate in a sense. The people who aided him in deserting were a band of sellswords. Of course, a farmer like Zack was hardly of any use to a mercenary band. However, the band had lost many of its members during the war, and their aim was to replenish their numbers as soon as possible. This was the reason why the mercenary band let him join so easily. However, they were not a proper, law-abiding organization. While they fought as mercenaries in wartime, during peacetime they were essentially bandits. After that, Zack led a life filled with unspeakable deeds. Having was better than not having. Taking was better than being taken from. Making others weep was better than weeping himself. This was the life Zack lived. He did not feel it was wrong, nor did he regret it. His faith in that grew ever deeper every time he heard the wails of the oppressed. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Zack ran through the paupers' district. He ran toward a world that was a deeper red than the setting sun. Having run continuously ever since leaving the inn, he was panting heavily, and his forehead was covered in sweat. His building fatigue made him want to stop, and he wondered if he should take a break. However, time was tight, and so Zack spurred his tired body forward and continued running. Just then, as Zack took a sharp turn, that was close, mumbled the figure on the other side of the corner as it somersaulted away, accompanied by the clattering of metal. As startled, Zack looked at the black shape which had leapt clear. She was a pretty girl. She wore a black cape which made her seem to blend into the shadows, but her shiny purple eyes, filled with curiosity, were looking straight at Zack. Tired and out of patience, Zack yelled at her. "That's my line. It's dangerous. Watch where you're going." The girl did not seem afraid of Zack's ranting. Instead, she smiled coldly. That spine-chilling smile made Zack retreat instinctively, without the courage to so much as draw his weapon. It was like a lion glaring at a mouse. Perhaps the sound of metal he heard when the girl had leapt back came from the armor she was wearing. An armed and armored girl, perhaps she was an adventurer. He had picked the wrong person to antagonize. Danger sirens blared through Zack's head, and at the same time he thought of something. He did not look down on her as weak, because she was a woman. Zack knew that there was an adventurer team composed purely of strong women. The strongest man in the mercenary band he belonged to had brought it up once. On the other hand, Zack might have been a mercenary, but he was one of the weakest members of their fighting men. This was why he had been given a job like this. He was covered in sweat from running, and as Zack began regretting what he had done, it quickly became another type of sweat altogether. Just as a look of fear completely covered Zack's face, the girl's smile lost its frightening quality. Well, forget it. I don't have time for this. Still, if I run into you again, you're going to have a bad time. The girl went around him, leaving those words behind. Interested, Zack turned to watch as she left. He mused that the place in front of him was an uninhabited part of the Paupers district. What was a beautiful woman doing out here so late? The thought piqued his curiosity, but he had something more important waiting for him, so he cut his introspection short and moved on. Soon, he arrived in the Paupers district, at a corner which was filled with many rundown houses. He looked around to see if anyone was following him. The sun slowly sank beneath the horizon, painting the world in shades of black, so Zack focused on whether anyone was hiding in dark corners. He had already checked several times before now, but just to be safe, he took one last look. Zack nodded in satisfaction, and as he got his breathing under control, he knocked thrice on a door. After waiting 5 seconds, he knocked 4 more times. After giving the prearranged signal, he received an immediate response. The creaking of wood came from the other side of the door, and the wooden shutter, which blocked the peephole, slid out of the way. Zack could see a man's eyes on the other side of the door, looking him up and down and verifying his identity. It's you. Wait a minute. Without waiting for Zack's reply, the man slid the peephole shut, and that sound was followed by that of a heavy lock disengaging. The door cracked open slightly. Come in. There was a faint scent of rot coming from within the room, which was as far removed from the place Zack had been as the heavens were from the earth. Hoping that his nose could get used to the smell, Zack nimbly wriggled into the room. Once the door shut, he saw that the interior was tiny and dark. The door led directly to the kitchen and dining room, which was furnished with a table. There was a candle on the table, whose feeble light somewhat dispelled the darkness of the room. A filthy man who looked like he dealt in violence for a living pulled up a nearby chair and took a seat. The chair creaked as he sat on it, as though moaning in pain. The man was heavily muscled and had a barrel chest, and the exposed parts of his arms and his face were lightly scarred. The chair looked like it was going to give way under his weight. Oh, Zack. What's wrong? What happened? There's been a change in the situation. The prey is preparing to move. So we'll have to make our move as well. Zack nodded silently. The man quietly grumbled, why now, can't they think of us a little, as he reached up to scratch his messy hair. Can't you delay them somehow? That'll be difficult, because it was that woman's request. The man had already heard Zack talk about that woman several times, and he frowned deeply. That old man should use his brains a little and try to talk her down. The roads at night are nasty places to be, with scary bandits showing up and all. Give me a break, even an idiot knows about that sort of thing. How about sabotaging a coach wheel and dragging out the departure until tomorrow? That won't work, he's already loading the luggage. It would be better to act quickly, right? That's true. The man stared into the air as he thought. Then, when are they moving out? In about 2 hours. That'll be cutting it really close. What should I do? I'll need to contact the others after this. With only 2 hours, it'll be hard, but their prize catches. The man twiddled his thumbs as he considered how much time the entire process would take. Zack simply listened to his musings in silence, looking down at his hands. Rich people like that piss you off, right? Zack thought of the delicate, dainty hands of the girl who was addressed as the young mistress. Nobody who worked on a farm would have hands as pretty as that. Their skin was split from icy water, and thickened by swinging a hoe, and even their nails grew gnarled. A farmer's hands were like that. He knew well that the world was unfair. However, the corner of Zack's mouth twisted up in a lewd smile that bared his teeth. Can I have some fun with that woman? You'll have to wait for us to finish first, and since we're going to ransom her off, you can't go too far. Don't hurt her too badly. The man sneered lasciviously. Perhaps it was because of his rising desire, but he suddenly got to his feet. All right, we'll do it. I'll contact the chief. Got it. We'll send about 10 guys ahead to the usual place to ambush them. You should move too and get them there in about 4 hours' time. If you haven't arrived by then, we'll make the first move. So keep the prey obedient and lower their guard. Part 3A stagecoach galloped away from the fortress city. It was a large vehicle that could comfortably seat 6 people, pulled by a quartet of horses. The disk of the full moon shone in the night sky, illuminating the land with surprising brightness. That said, racing at full speed through the night was still a foolish course of action. The wisest course of action would have been to pitch tents, light lanterns, and post sentries while they spent the night here. The world at night was not under mankind's control. No, that would not be entirely accurate. No place without light could be considered part of humanity's world. The night concealed all manner of animals, demi-humans, and monsters. Many creatures possessed the gift of dark vision, and these creatures often attacked humanity. Still, the passengers in the stagecoach barely felt their vehicle galloping through the perilous night. This was not because of good shock absorbers or the like, but because the coach was traveling along a cobblestoned road. The paving of roads had begun after the suggestion of the Golden Princess, but the only places where it had been completed were in those domains held by the crown, and by Marquis Raven, one of the 6 great nobles. This was because the other nobles protested this gesture, feeling that such roads would only benefit the empire when they attacked the kingdom. The maintenance costs for those roads had also sparked much debate. The reason why Princess Renner had reached out to traders to foot the bill was because the nobles in charge of the areas through which the roads passed were dragging their feet on the matter. Thus, the paving work was in this a sad state of affairs. Since this region was not too far from Irantal, which was administered by the crown, the work here was of quite a high standard. Still, it was not perfect. The wagon wobbled a little as it traveled along the street, and some faint vibrations made their way to the passengers. These tremors terminated the conversation between the occupants of the vehicle. Among these occupants were Sabas, with Solution by his side. Opposite him was Shaltir, flanked by 2 of the vampire brides who were her minions cum concubines. Zack was obviously driving the wagon from the driver's seat. A brief silence filled the air inside the wagon, and then at great length, Sabas spoke to break it. There is one thing I have been meaning to ask you for a while. What do you have in mind? I noticed that you and Orasama do not get along very well. Is there any particular reason for that? Actually, I feel we do get along quite well. As Shaltir answered quietly, she stared at the nail of her pinky finger, as though bored. The pearly white fingernail was about 2 centimeters long. Although she had a file in hand, the nail looked quite neatly trimmed, so there was no need to work further on it. Shaltir also felt that further action was unnecessary, so she tossed the file to one of the vampire brides by her side. After that, she made to grope the breasts of the vampires beside her with her now empty hands. However, when she noticed the expressions on the 2 people in front of her, she retracted her hands, a somewhat embarrassed look on her face. It does not seem that way, Sabas continued. Shaltir's face wrinkled up, like she had eaten something bitter, and then she replied, I think we do get along. I simply tease her a little because my creator, Peroroncino-sama, designed me to feud with her. Still, there is no real enmity there. Perhaps Bukabukagama-sama designed that girl to not get along with me as well. Shaltir waved her hand, as though she were very bored, and then met Sabaz's gaze for the first time. Speaking of which, my creator Pararansino-sama, and that girl's creator, Bukabukagama-sama, were elder sister and younger brother. So in that sense, she and I are also sisters. A sibling relationship, I see. In the past, Pararansino-sama discussed the matter with other supreme beings, Lucifer-sama, and Nishiki and Rai-sama, when they came to my domain. A look of reverence crept into Shaltir's eyes as she recounted her memories of accompanying these exalted personages. Pararansino-sama once mentioned that Bukabukagama had the profession of a seiyuu. So popular was she that she even lent her talents to things called erogaze, so whenever he purchased a game he eagerly anticipated, he would end up thinking of his sister's face, and he would lose his motivation. Shaltir added that she did not know what he meant by that. A somewhat baffled Sabaz tilted his head and said, "A seiyuu. I remember that seems to be a line of work which involves the use of sound. It seems they are skilled in singing, so perhaps it should be similar to a bard." After hearing Sabaz's answer, Shaltir laughed, like the tinkling of silver bells, and replied in the negative, "That is not the case." "It is not? How so?" "I once heard Bukabukagama-sama say that being a seiyuu meant giving a soul through sound. In other words, a seiyuu is a job which creates life." "Oh. I see. It seems I was laboring under a grave misconception. Thank you very much for your correction, Shaltir-sama." Sabaz and all the others created by the supreme beings were infused with knowledge upon their creation, but that was all they had. Because they did not know real life, amusing mishaps sometimes occurred, like say, making a mistake about their revered master's jobs. Feeling terribly uncomfortable, Sabaz muttered to himself, engraving the meaning of being a seiyuu into his heart so he would not make the same mistake again. "There's no need to take it to heart, right, Sabaz, since we are fellow travelers, there's no need to be so formal." "Is that so, Shaltir-sama?" "Don't address me as Sama, we are all servants of the supreme beings. They may have handed down our positions and set some of us over others, but the truth is that we're all basically the same." She had the right of it. Solution was only obeying Sabaz because she had been ordered to do so. Originally, she and Sabaz were of the same status. "I understand, Shaltir. Then, I shall address you in this way from now on." "That's good to hear. Come to think of it, you don't get along with Demiurge either, do you?" Sabaz remained silent. Shaltir narrowed her eyes, like a playful child, and continued asking, "The supreme beings did not design you that way, so why is that?" "I wonder. The truth is, I don't know why that is the case as well. It must be some sort of instinct that makes me dislike him. However, the same should apply to him as well. It doesn't seem that way to me. Still, it might be because the feelings of our creators, the supreme beings, were deeply engraved within our hearts. That is very likely to be the case." Shaltir carefully studied Sabaz, who nodded to her. Then, after considering his position, Shaltir felt that he would know the answer to the question which had long hidden in her heart: what kind of people are found in the 8th floor? "I know about Victim, but who else is there besides him?" Sabaz frowned at the sudden query. He looked at Shaltir, a stern expression on his face, trying to discern what she was up to. From where she was seated to the side, Solution's expression changed as well, though it was subtle enough that the others did not notice. In the past, there were fools who defied the supreme beings and invaded Nazarick, breaching the defenses of the 7th floor. However, they did not reach the 9th floor, where the supreme beings resided. That being the case, they must have been stopped at the 8th floor, right? Though I do not have any